Yo guys, what's going on? BFViking here, and today we're going to be taking a look back in history, back at Battlefield games from the past, taking a look at some of the gadgets that those older games had, and rating 5 gadgets as the worst in Battlefield history. Starting with Battlefield 3, going all the way up to Battlefield 5. So, starting us off here at Battlefield 3, before we start this video, I just want to add that we will be counting grenades as well in this list. BF3 for the most part had some pretty fun and effective gadgets that you could use. Each class was given the tools it needed to carry out their job effectively, and for the most part they were all pretty good. And although this list was quite difficult to narrow down just because of how many good gadgets Battlefield 3 had, eventually I think the SOFLAM was probably the worst and least used gadget in Battlefield 3, and probably also one of the least effective gadgets in the game for the Recon class. For those of you that need a reminder of what the SOFLAM was and what it did, basically it was a gadget for the Recon class in Battlefield 3 that marked out enemy vehicles so engineers or planes could lock onto them quicker. It could also act as a remote camera, which sounds good, but that is what the MAV could also be used for. Plus, that thing could fly and destroy explosives, making it a much better choice than the SOFLAM. For the SOFLAM to be used most effectively, you would have to be playing with a buddy who was going as the engineer class with a Javelin rocket launcher so they could take out enemy tanks, but still, it really didn't make that much of a difference anyways. Other than that, all of the other gadgets in Battlefield 3 all had their own uses and were all very useful. So, with that being said, let's move on to Battlefield 4. With Battlefield 4 came a lot more gadget options than Battlefield 3 had. Each DLC, DICE added in more new gadgets, and pretty much most of them were very fun to use. We had some awesome ones like C4 for the Support and Recon class, which allowed us to yeet our friends across the map in a jeep. And we also had some medic underbarrel weapons, which made for some seriously good trolling material. But as I was saying, we did have some bad ones, with the worst out of the bunch being the Riot Shield. The Riot Shield was not actually in the game from launch, but it was added with the Dragon's Teeth DLC, and it was given to the support class, and honestly, it really didn't have any use whatsoever. You couldn't use a weapon with it, you couldn't place it down and use it as cover, and it took 2 or sometimes 3 bashes to kill somebody with it. And if a shotgun with slugs or frag rounds hit you with the Riot Shield, the glass would break, giving people a clear shot straight into your face. So overall, it was a pretty poor gadget to use. The only real good thing about it was the Riot Shield only servers, but other than that, it was a pretty bad gadget. Sticking with Battlefield 4 here, there are a few grenades and gadgets that you would think are pretty bad once you read them on paper, but once you get in game, they do have a pretty good use, with the hand flare being a prime example. It sounds pretty pointless, but once you use it in game, it is amazing for blocking out those flare scopes, and the same goes for flashbang grenades. But there is one gadget that sounds good on paper like those do, but it is just a really big waste of time once you use it in game, and that is the DS3 decoy, which again was a gadget not from the base game, but was added with the Final Stand DLC. And if you can't already tell by the name DS3 decoy, well then, let me explain it to you. The DS3 decoy was a gadget that every class has access to, and in larger scale game modes like Rush, Conquest, and all of those other modes, it is a totally useless gadget, but it could be used in smaller modes like Defuse or Team Deathmatch, but even still, it was a pretty bad choice even in those modes. Once you spawn in, you are given 2 of these decoys, and they basically show up a fake enemy spotted on the minimap and emit a pretty realistic sounding noise of gunfire, which admittedly I did get tricked by it a few times once they first released, but once you see that the target on the map is just staying still and the fire is coming from the exact same spot, you learn how to tell the difference between these and a real enemy pretty quickly. So overall, a pretty lame gadget. With Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 now being covered, let's move on to Battlefield 1. Battlefield 1 really stepped it up in terms of how many gadgets were available for each class. Just like in Battlefield 4, each new DLC brought in new gadgets for each class. But the worst gadget was in fact in the game from day one, and that was the repair tool. Yeah, I know, a gadget that sounds like an extremely important tool to any good team player, but in Battlefield 1, vehicles could now self-repair themselves, and with the implementation of the tanker and pilot classes, this meant that a tanker could simply just jump out of their tank and use the repair tool by themselves. Having a support player give up an ammo crate, a mortar, or a limpet mine for a repair tool that a tanker player doesn't even need doesn't make any sense at all, and in fact, using the repair tool is taking away from the support player's role of being a support gunner. A support gunner is supposed to lay down suppressing fire and resupply their teammates with fresh ammo. The only real reason for using this was to either complete assignments or to complete some of those challenges. Other than that though, a pretty useless gadget, and in my opinion, it should have been given to a different class. With Battlefield 1 now out of the way, let's get on to our final worst gadget in the Battlefield franchise. Although Battlefield 5 suffers from a lack of content, each class still has a somewhat decent amount of gadgets available to them. It's nothing crazy like Battlefield 1 by any means, but it is enough to give players a few different choices. But the worst gadget in Battlefield 5, which was also in Battlefield 1, is the Sniper Decoy. The Sniper Decoy for the Recon class is pretty much just a fake Recon player that tricks people into think that they are being targeted by an enemy Recon player, as it emits a fake scope glint when you look in its general direction. And although it's not an absolutely terrible gadget, but it is by far the worst out of the options that the Recon class has available. When you equip the Sniper Decoy, you will spawn in with just one of them, but on the plus side, it does automatically spot any enemies that are shooting in its direction, which can come in useful, but if I wanted a gadget for spotting players, I would just use the spotting scope and do it a lot more effectively. So, overall, a pretty bad gadget. So there we have the top 5 worst gadgets in the history of the Battlefield franchise. Let me know if you think that I missed one, or if I chose one that you thought was good, and also vote on the top right for which gadget you think is the absolute worst out of these chosen 5. But for now, if you enjoyed the video and want to stay up to date with all of my latest content, make sure to hit that bell and subscribe icon, and also leave a like, as I really do appreciate it. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next Battlefield video.